If you guys don't know Kelly, Somerville is the new appointed since September 2024 CEO of Elora, the Livestock Research Innovation Corporation. Kelly is a University of Guelph animal science grad with an extensive background in beef industry, as well as hosting or holding past roles with the Ontario Federation of Agriculture and Ontario Soil and Crop Improvement Association. She also co-owns a small herd of purebred Angus cattle. She's fully committed to driving research as a key element of the livestock innovation cycle and also helping get research into practice. I'll pass it over to you, Kelly, when you're ready.
All right, thanks so much for the introduction, Jen. Yeah, as Jen mentioned, I'm new to the role of CEO of Elora, and I'm glad she mentioned that, because hopefully that gives me a little bit of grace and I can play my new card for any mistakes here today, but certainly really pleased to be here. I'd like to just ask, has anybody in the audience been to a group roundtable event before that Elora hosted? Okay, so you guys are already ahead of me, because this is my very first one with Elora, so I'm pretty excited to be here. And as Jen mentioned, I previously worked with OFA and Soil and Crop. Very pleased to have some of my former colleagues from both those organizations here. Definitely, hopefully didn't burn too many bridges there. I'm going to just give a bit of a background on the history of extension and how we ended up with GRIP. So a couple of the things we're going to be talking about today under this theme of GRIP being a team sport. So who Elora is, what we do, a little bit of the history and evolution that's accompanied extension, what GRIP is, why we do it, and what Elora is doing about it. And bonus points if you can recognize that all-star team in the picture. That's from one of my very favorite shows. So who Elora is. So to start, this is a Venn diagram that I actually stole directly from my former boss, Mike McMorris, who's here. And it's the cleanest, easiest way to explain where Elora fits. It's a funny little organization, and it's really unique to the innovation system. We imagine we've got these three big sectors with industry, academia, and government, where they cross over in that middle space is where Elora operates. So we do a lot of connecting, a lot of bridging between these groups. There's different cultures and languages associated with each of them. I think even coming in this morning, somebody made the comment, in a room this diverse, AI can mean a lot of different things. So depending, we should really establish that. It can be a little awkward. But this is the list of all of our members. So Elora is pleased to have all of the Ontario commodity groups as members. We also have some affiliates involved in that ag ecosystem for innovation, and we are pleased to have ex officios representing University of Guelph and OMAPA on our board as well. So that provides a lot of great insight and a great starting point. So our role. Because we represent commodity groups, it's important to recognize that these groups do some fantastic work, but they're inundated day in and day out with a lot of crises and constantly coming up with new problems that they have to address day out. So where Elora is a little bit removed from that, we have the privilege of being able to foresight a little bit further out, really look at that kind of 3 to 5 year scope, what's coming down the pipeline. We have some external working committees with our International Research Advisory Committee, IRAC, and our Emerging Trends and Opportunities Committee, ETOC, which has, if you ever want to, if you're bored, want to kill a few minutes, hop on our website and look at the people making up those committees. It's a really impressive lineup, and we have some truly valuable insight that comes out of that. We also do a lot of work building those connections, doing a lot of networking at events like this, bringing people together from across the space, because we really do, at the end of the day, one of the big philosophies at Elora is that it all comes down to people. We provide research services, so we help with research priority setting for members, and we provide a cross-sector livestock research document to the ministry every year. And of course, growth is a big part of what we do, and we dabble in the commercialization space as well. Where does extension start? Full disclosure, this is all past history that's been told to me by others. I was not in the workforce in the 90s. And so this is coming from where we were, where there was a kind of formalized extension service that was provincially delivered. And unfortunately, through budget cuts, that really all but disappeared as that formalized service. Extension still is an internationally recognized term. It's still used elsewhere, and we still have extension, but what we're going to talk about is how that's evolved and what we call it today. Where extension, what it looks like elsewhere, it's still really big south of the border. This is just to give a couple stats for some scope here. And the North American Agriculture Advisory Network, NAN, actually has identified extension as an area deserving investment, and that's something that the Canadian Ag Minister sits on. So it is seen as a big priority here. And for a bit of perspective, Virginia State University alone has 240 extension staff, and they have access to over 100 extension offices in the state alone. Obviously, that's not something that we have or can build in Canada or specifically in Ontario. It's not really realistic for us, but they also have some great stats on the return that's generated from research and development in agriculture, and estimate that's even higher for extension. That brings us to KTT, KM, KE. Other than an alphabet soup, this actually translates into knowledge translation and transfer, which is the newer term adopted for essentially extension. And it's a term that's used by OMAPA. It's actually built into the alliance, so that's the agreement between OMAPA and the University of Guelph. So for Tier 1 funding, there is actually KTT components for all of those research proposals. And there's actually separate calls around KTT, which Adam is going to discuss later. So there's the definition for it. And then we also have knowledge mobilization, which is essentially used interchangeably with KTT. It's favored by the University of Guelph and some of the federal government levels. But essentially KTT and KM are fairly similar in terms of scope for our purposes today. Then we bring to knowledge exchange. So this is a new one. This was brought up at our IRAC in-person meeting at the end of September. And I just, there's consideration for yet another term, but what I find really interesting about this knowledge exchange idea is it really highlights that it's not knowledge transfer coming from one person to another. It is a two-way street between researchers and our end user that we want to adopt this technology, being the farmer. That information has to flow both ways and has to be accepted and encouraged. Where we're at now, like we mentioned, this extension gap has somewhat been filled, but it's not as formalized, it's not as structured as it used to be at one time. We have these parties that have followed money essentially because they're private entities. That's what they have to do to survive. So we have a bit of discrepancy when we're looking at a livestock lens between commodity groups of who has more access to these services than others. We have this need for researchers to get on farm, engage with producers, and producers to engage researchers as well. I think every time we do a farm tour and we get researchers onto a farm, they're always shocked at how much producers want to talk to them and vice versa. And so it seems to constantly be this new idea or this, and it's great to see that it's being realized, but it takes getting on farm to get to that point and establish those relationships. That brings us to GRIP, getting research into practice. So it's the reason that we're all here today, and it's a term that Elric coined to move past that language debate around KTT, KM, and everything else. And it's a bit of a more holistic approach to that idea of extension, right? Where KTT is typically built into the end of a project. The idea behind GRIP is that it's happening continuously. It's happening before a proposal is even submitted or conceived. It starts with engagement between producers and industry and researchers. And it can happen in a lot of different ways. We'll go over some of the GRIP products that are available. Jen touched on some of them that have already been put out as far as podcasts and all other kind of resources. So it can look like a lot of different things, but the main tenet being that it's something we do throughout the innovation process. It doesn't start or stop just at the end of a project. And it's embedded in that innovation system. Typically, we draw the innovation system as a linear path, but at Elric, we tend to imagine it as a cycle. Again, similar to the way we see GRIP, it's one thing feeds into another, and it's continuous. And one idea with, as opposed to KTT, is that we really try to foster that cross-sector and cross-discipline approach. We recognize that not one person is going to solve it, which is why we're having a team event, because it takes everybody here. And a spoiler alert, that includes all of you. So we have this idea of GRIP being this pathway, it's a holistic approach, but we can't expect researchers alone to take this on. It's not realistic to be able to approach every producer in your sector. So we have people who act as these GRIP intermediaries, whether that's veterinarians or nutritionists or some of the OMAPA specialists who can certainly help in this. but everybody plays a role to varying degree. And it's not everybody's area of interest. That's okay. We have a lot of keen people here today. Obviously, you're here and engaged, and we encourage you to, take on that grip role however you can within that research system. Jen already touched a little bit on our early career mentorship programs. This is what Elric is doing in the area of GRIP and to further that initiative. So I won't go into too much detail, but there is an early career research award associated with our mentorship program. So anybody who successfully completes that mentorship program then has the opportunity to apply for this award. And we have some really great partners on this in Grand River Ag Society, Western Fair District, OBC and OAC. So we're really pleased to be able to offer that. And one thing that's a bit unique about this that really does highlight that GRIP component is that we're encouraging cross-sector research specifically, something to benefit livestock production as a whole. We also have our farming innovation tours. So this is an initiative that started last year. It's about getting, again, those three groups that we think, academia, industry, and government, get representatives from each of those on a bus, take them to a farm. We're standing in front of a manure spreader in this picture, not a glamorous picture, but it does come to the point of getting that dirt on your boots, we'll say. So the idea being they can foster networks amongst themselves, but also the reality is we're dealing with a population coming into the workforce who has less and less exposure to agriculture. So this is a great way to expose some of this realities of farming and just show that producers can be approachable and get a little bit of exposure into that, potentially coming from a different cross sector, a different commodity rather, or not being on a farm at all. We also have our Engineering a Better Farm initiative, and bonus points if anyone can identify the person in the room who's in this picture. So this was taken at a tour when we took our IRAC group to the University of Waterloo under our Engineering a Better Farm initiative. So it came about recognizing that there's a lot of potential in engineering, a lot of solutions that already exist that maybe haven't migrated to agriculture and specifically to livestock. So we went out to all of the producers that we have across different commodities. We asked them, what are some challenges you have that engineering solutions might be able to solve? And they gave us this really great list. We compiled it, broke it down by commodity and by area, and then we shopped it out to the University of Guelph Engineering, Waterloo, Windsor, and really just tried to engage those engineering faculties in livestock. And so we have some great ideas. There's going to be some exciting stuff happening in this area. But this was actually delivered to like a broad range of engineers, but really we actually brought it to our annual symposium in June. So anybody who's there might recognize it. And we had Mary Wells from the University of Waterloo speak to it. And for a bit of perspective, Waterloo has over 1,800 first-year undergraduate engineering students and a faculty of over, I think it's 240. Like, it's wild, the facilities and faculty that they have access to. And they're generating some phenomenal research which can be applied pretty easily to livestock production. It's just about getting livestock in front of these people. So that's another way that we're just forwarding when it comes to Elric's initiatives. We have a couple of great products. I won't go into a ton of detail. Jen touched on them already. They're available on our website. It's something that's ongoing, and we're always looking to build that out. And so certainly, if you ever have opportunity or looking to collaborate on that, we'd encourage you to reach out. And that is all. So thank you very much, everyone.